There is only one important rule of improvisation: there is no rule in improvisation, because otherwise it is in a conflict with the origin of improvisation. But at the same time, there are some regularities to follow. So it is important to know the harmony, form, history, but at the moment of improvisation you have to think only about improvisation, but not about structures and harmonies. Just play music the same if it was written. The main difference between common improvisation, especially jazz improvisation, and this kind of improvisation I am talking about is you do not have to actually improvise. Paradox is in different way of interpretation of what it is look like, and in fact of creation. From the point of listener, it is improvisation, because there is no written score. And from the point of listener you do not know what is going to sound next. But as this improvisational composition was finished, it is already look like a composed piece, because it has all structural characteristics of composition. So that is another difference in this kind of improvisation. As for the point of performer, let's think at first about performing process of known and memorized music. Of course, the way of performing could be different, but I would like to concentrate on the composer's concept as a performer, because improvisation is also somehow composed. It is important to say that ideally performing is also act of creating, even if it already known piece. The way of thinking is look like composing music while playing, so every next note and chord seems to be very important and even unpredictable. Of course, from being as a composer, there are extremely many ways of choosing what to play next, if it was not written down, so every next note or chord would have twice many possibilities than previous ones. But, of course, performer chooses to play what was already thought and structuralized in a best way for composer and written down instead of choosing something to play from chaotic number of opportunities. In improvisation, otherwise, this way of thinking as a choosing every next note from some amount is a great thing. I have to say, this amount of possible variations of every next note comes from skills, mood and talent. Choosing every next note by influence of your current mood without changing the main idea of the piece, that is a diamond of improvisation, but, unfortunately, it is impossible in performance already composed piece, because there is already programmed mood and feelings that could be interpreted in different ways, though. Back to the analyzing the way of thinking about an improvisation process. It is quite obvious that it is really hard to play something you do not know and do not expect. But there is some barrier that makes improvisation impossible in this way. It means that nearly all improvisation is a basic already made system and structural improvisation. But in this kind of improvisation that I do, the onlyest already made thing before performing is the idea or mood. While performing this kind of improvisation, I do not compose music live, or do not improvise, but perform the piece as a written one. The only difference is in fact I can choose what to play next. It is very important to understand that the main thing you have to think while improvising is only what I am playing now. At the same time you remember, that is another part of the brain, memory, what have you already played to make a form you want. There should be some experience of doing this in order to be relaxed while playing. It is important to say that any exercises, etudes do not make any sense, because of the main rule of improvisation, there is no rule. The most important thing is to play and try. As we know from basic improvisation, there is a truth, there are no mistakes, but that is variation. It could sound better or worse, but it is still not a mistake. In this new kind of improvisation I am speaking about, it does not work at all, because mistake would sound false, the same as in composition. How do we know it is a mistake in composition? If it makes something wrong to main concept of the piece, which means that every note in this composition is unique and extremely important. Here is the same. There is big amount of opportunities what to play next, but you have to choose right one, so the piece you play become valuable and sounds like composition. Of course, back to the mood, there are different ways of creating some same ideas without changing concept, using different music structures, but music, actually, would be the same. It means you can feel your mood and start playing improvisation from this current feeling, but you may not change the main concept of the piece. I mean, it is more important to play accomplished music thought then change the way of how you play this thought, using this note or another. As for abundance of this kind of improvisation, it is important to know a lot of styles, be able to play technique music and be quite skillful. Otherwise, the improvisation would be weak and repetitive, which means it is not an improvisation anymore. I think it is time to conclude. The word improvisation actually does not mean the meaning of this phenomenon I was speaking. Also, it is not a composition, but something between that is quite new thing. It could be thought that it is the same as the freestyle improvisation, but the main subject was about theoretical constituent, that is obviously different from main idea of freestyle improvisation. As it was said before, this phenomenon is intermediate between composition and actual improvisation, so the name of it should be improvisational composition. Of course, as we know, it is not written music, so it is not a composition at its full meaning, but at the same time it is more than just pure improvisation.